significant event. The Palestinian militant group Hamas launched a legal challenge against the UK's 2021 decision to designate the group as a terrorist organization. The group, which had its military wing prescribed by the UK over 2 decades ago, argues that the decision to extend the ban to the entire movement was politically motivated and undermines the pursuit of peace in the region, led by Musa Abu Marzouk, the head of Hamas's Foreign Relations Office. The group is urging British courts to overturn the ruling, claiming it infringes upon fundamental rights like freedom of speech and political expression. Hamas contends that this designation stifles vital dialogue needed to broker a political solution and hinders efforts for a long-term settlement in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, drawing parallels to historic cases such as the African National Congress in South Africa and the Irish Republican Army in Northern Ireland. The group argues that such prescription prevents peaceful negotiations by criminalizing open debate and political discourse. Legal representatives emphasize the chilling effect the ban has on academics, journalists, and ordinary Palestinians in Gaza, painting the move as an impediment to any meaningful resolution. This challenge raises important questions about the balance between national security concerns and the right to free political expression, as well as the broader implications for international diplomacy and peace efforts in one of the world's most protracted conflicts under the UK's Terrorism Act. Anyone supporting or associating with a proscribed group faces severe penalties. Hamas, while acknowledging that its actions fit the broad definition of terrorism under British law, argues that the label also unfairly extends to any group using violence for political aims, citing examples like the Israeli army and even British forces. The group insists that such a blanket designation creates barriers to peace as it stigmatizes discussions with terrorists, further deepening the conflict. Hamas does not deny that its actions fall within the wide definition of terrorism under the Terrorism Act 2000. Instead, it notes that the definition also covers all groups and organizations around the world that use violence to achieve political objectives, including the Israeli Armed Forces, the Ukrainian Army, and indeed the British Armed Forces. Of course, not all such groups are prescribed as ultimately. That is a question of discretion for the Secretary of State. Transition to a political process is hindered by the terrorism label, as talking with terrorists is a taboo. The legal submission highlights a crucial point. The prescription hampers not only political dialogue, but also humanitarian efforts. Aid to Gaza, a region suffering immense hardship, is at risk of being labeled terrorist support simply due to the group's designation. Hamas contends that this stifles much-needed conversations on the Palestinian issue, preventing a constructive path forward. Barristers representing Hamas emphasized that regardless of one's stance on the group, policies that suppress open debate only obstruct the long-term pursuit of peace. The UK Home Secretary now has 90 days to respond to the appeal. If the decision is upheld, Hamas could challenge it further, potentially dragging the matter into a high-stakes legal battle that could have significant ramifications for how the West navigates diplomacy with groups involved in armed conflict. Israeli airstrikes have wreaked havoc on Gaza's Dejal neighborhood, killing at least 35 Palestinians and injuring 55 more. The bombing, described by witnesses as a massacre with the full meaning of the word, has left 80 people missing beneath the rubble. Hospitals overwhelmed, helmed by the sheer number of casualties, are urgently calling for blood donations to treat the wounded. This latest attack is part of Israel's brutal campaign against Gaza, which has now claimed the lives of over 61,700 Palestinians, with more than 115,000 wounded. Since the conflict intensified, Al Jazeera reported, citing the steps of the Gaza Health Ministry. The situation is dire, with thousands feared dead under the debris adding to the already staggering human toll. In parallel, Israeli forces have expanded their operations in the occupied West Bank, launching a major raid on the Balat, a refugee camp in Nablus, further escalating the violence as Gaza continues to face unprecedented destruction. The international community watches the death toll climbing to horrifying new heights. Meanwhile, In a bold move, French President Emmanuel Macron on April 9th revealed that France could recognize a Palestinian state by June, a significant shift in foreign policy that could reshape the Middle East diplomatic landscape. Speaking in an interview on France 5 television, Macron emphasized that this decision would not be made to appease anyone, but because he believes it's the right time for France to take action. His goal is not only to recognize Palestine, but also to encourage a broader shift where countries that support Palestine might also be encouraged to recognize Israel, a step that has been a sticking point for many in the region that we need to move towards recognition of a Palestinian state. And so, over the next few months, we will. I'm not doing it to please anyone. I'll do it because at some point it will be right, and because I also want to take part in a collective dynamic that should also enable those who defend Palestine to recognize Israel in their terms, something that many of them are not doing. Our objective is somewhere in June with Saudi Arabia to chair this conference where we could finalize the movement towards reciprocal recognition by several countries, despite Palestine being recognized as a sovereign state by nearly 150 nations, major Western powers, including the US, UK, France, Germany, and Japan, have not extended formal recognition. Macron's push comes amidst an ongoing regional stalemate, with key players like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq refusing to recognize Israel. Macron sees June as a critical moment to build momentum for reciprocal recognition between Israel and Palestine, and he hopes to lead a diplomatic conference with Saudi Arabia to finalize this shift. Additionally, reacting to Trump's remark calling Gaza a real estate project, Macron spoke on the reality in the Palestinian enclave that 1 million passengers with no film. The reality is that you have 2 million people who are trapped. 2 million after months and months of bombings and a terrible war where tens of thousands of people have lost their lives. There are tens of thousands of children who are mutilated without families. That's what we're talking about when we talk about Gaza. It's not a real estate project. And what we experienced this morning, because you were with me, where women, children had to face the tragedy. And so I don't know how these children will grow up. Can you imagine for a second what they have already gone through? You see the level, sometimes, of hardships, of violence that can exist when all you have known is bombings and atrocity. But they all said one thing. As soon as I can walk again, I want to return to Gaza. Macron's remarks signal a potential turning point in Middle Eastern diplomacy, offering a glimmer of hope for a long-sought resolution, but also raising the stakes for the region's volatile relationships and peace prospects.